My own sister publicly humiliated me in front of 50 strangers at a luxury ski resort, declaring I wasn't real family because I refused to live beyond my means like the rest of them. Ashley stood there in her $1,000 ski outfit surrounded by designer luggage that cost more than most people's monthly salary, delivering the cruelest Christmas gift imaginable while our parents nodded approval like I was the family disappointment. The betrayal was devastating because I'd driven 4 hours through mountain snow just to drop off Christmas presents for her kids, the nephews I'd been banned from seeing during their real family vacation. 28 years old, working as an accountant, living in a modest apartment, and somehow that made me unworthy of spending Christmas with blood relatives who measured family love in credit card limits. But watching Ashley savor my humiliation was the worst part. She smiled while telling 50 resort guests that I didn't belong, enjoyed explaining to strangers how my lifestyle choices embarrassed the family, relished every moment of putting me in my place in front of people who could afford $10,000 ski vacations. Our parents, Robert and Linda, stood behind her like royal guards, protecting their golden child's right to destroy her brother's dignity in public. Real family doesn't drag each other down with their mediocrity, she announced to the marble-floored lobby, her voice carrying to every corner, while other guests pretended not to stare. Some people choose success, others choose to stay small forever. What none of us knew was that someone very powerful had been quietly observing our family dynamics for months, documenting every cruel word and entitled decision. Someone who controlled more money than Ashley had ever dreamed of, who'd been secretly funding their luxury lifestyle while they treated me like garbage. My sister thought she knew what real family meant, but she was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her life about actions and consequences. To understand how my sister could casually destroy me in public, you need to know about the family dynamic that had ruled our household since we were kids. Ashley was the golden child who could do no wrong, even when wrong was all she ever did with money. Every designer purchase was an investment. Every luxury vacation was networking. Every maxed-out credit card was just temporary until her next big break came through. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one who worked 2 jobs. Through college, graduated without debt, and chose a steady career in accounting over flashy schemes that promised quick wealth. But in my family's eyes, Ashley's debt-funded lifestyle made her successful, while my financial responsibility made me boring. My parents treated Ashley's expensive taste like proof of ambition, while my budget-conscious choices were seen as lack of vision. When she bought a BMW she couldn't afford, they praised her for thinking big. When I bought a reliable used car with cash, they worried I wasn't ambitious enough. Ashley was the golden child who could do no wrong, even when wrong was all she ever did financially. What I didn't understand for years was where Ashley's money actually came from. Her husband Brad's consulting business seemed to generate enough income for luxury cars, designer clothes, and expensive vacations, but the math never quite added up when I thought about it carefully. Ashley and Brad lived like millionaires on what should have been a middle-class income, always having money for the next luxury purchase, but never quite explaining how their business was so consistently profitable. They drove cars that cost more than most people's annual salary, lived in a house with mortgage payments that should have been impossible on their declared income. But nobody in the family questioned the source of their wealth because questioning Ashley was forbidden. She was living the dream, and I was the boring accountant who didn't understand that successful people took risks with money. Nobody questioned where Ashley's money came from, but I should have been paying attention to the bank account that never seemed to run dry. The person who was paying attention was Grandpa William, my mother's father, who'd built a small fortune through decades of careful investing and modest living. He watched Ashley's spending with the quiet intensity of someone who'd actually earned every dollar he'd ever made. Grandpa lived in the same small house he'd owned for 40 years, drove a 10-year-old truck, and wore clothes until they wore out. But his investment portfolio was worth more than most people could imagine, built through decades of living below his means and making smart financial choices. He never said much about Ashley's lifestyle, but I noticed how his eyes would narrow when she showed up to family dinners wearing jewelry that cost more than his monthly expenses. Grandpa William watched everything but said very little about what he saw, and that should have been our first warning. The crisis that led to my public humiliation started with Ashley's announcement that this year's Christmas would be extra special. A luxury ski trip to Vail that would cost more per day than most families spent on their entire holiday celebration. The way she described it, this wasn't just a vacation, but a test of who really belonged in our family's success story. "We're only taking real family this year," she announced during Sunday dinner at Mom and Dad's house. "People who understand what it means to live well and celebrate success properly. This isn't some budget motel situation, we're talking about a five-star resort experience." The message was clear: my modest lifestyle and financial responsibility had disqualified me from family Christmas. I wasn't successful enough, ambitious enough, or image-conscious enough to deserve a spot on their luxury vacation. The Christmas trip became a test of who belonged in this family, and apparently I failed before it even started. 2 weeks later, when I drove 4 hours through mountain snow just to drop off Christmas presents for my nephews, Ashley delivered her verdict in the resort lobby with an audience of 50 strangers. Her voice carried across the marble floors as she explained to anyone within earshot why I didn't belong among real family. "Real family doesn't embarrass each other with their lifestyle choices," she said, gesturing around at the opulent surroundings. "This is where successful people come to celebrate, not where we bring people who've chosen to stay small forever." The cruelty was surgical, designed to humiliate me while elevating her image in front of an audience who could afford to witness her performance. "Real family doesn't embarrass each other," she said while embarrassing me in front of 50 strangers who'd paid to avoid exactly this kind of drama. But the most devastating part was watching Mom and Dad stand behind her like palace guards protecting their golden child's right to destroy her brother. They nodded along with her assessment, avoided eye contact with me, and made it clear that Ashley's version of family hierarchy was the only one that mattered. Their silence spoke louder than Ashley's words. After 28 years, they'd chosen their side, and it wasn't mine. Mom and Dad stood there nodding like Ashley's cruelty was justified, choosing the golden child over basic human decency. The week after my humiliation, my family doubled down on their treatment of me like I was the problem rather than the victim of Ashley's public cruelty. Their social media filled with pictures from the ski trip, designer outfits against snowy mountain backdrops, expensive restaurant meals, luxury spa treatments, all carefully curated to show their perfect family vacation. What was particularly painful was how deliberately I'd been erased from their narrative. Photos from previous family gatherings were cropped to exclude me, captions talked about family time and the people who matter, and Ashley's posts specifically highlighted how real family supported each other's success and lifestyle choices. They posted pictures from the trip like I'd been erased from existence, celebrating their cruelty like it was a victory worth documenting. But 2 days after they returned, Grandpa William called me with questions that made everyone in the family uncomfortable. His voice was calm but persistent as he asked about Christmas, about why I hadn't been on the family trip, and about the misunderstanding that Mom had tried to explain away. "So let me understand this correctly," Grandpa said slowly. "Ashley decided you weren't successful enough to spend Christmas with your own nephews, and your parents thought this was reasonable." The way he phrased it, without emotion but with devastating clarity, made the family's behavior sound exactly as cruel as it actually was. When Mom tried to explain that it was about family harmony and not wanting to bring down the mood, Grandpa's silence spoke volumes. Grandpa started asking questions that made everyone uncomfortable, especially questions about what Ashley meant by real family. That's when Ashley launched her justification campaign, trying to control the narrative before Grandpa could form his own opinions about what had happened. She called him multiple times that week, explaining how my attitude had been affecting family gatherings and how they'd made the difficult decision to protect everyone from my negativity. "We had to think about what was best for the whole family," she told Grandpa during one of these calls that I later heard about. "Finn's been resentful about other people's success, and we didn't want his jealousy to ruin Christmas for the kids. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to protect family harmony." The audacity was breathtaking, reframing her cruelty as protection, her exclusion as family leadership, her public humiliation as necessary boundary setting. "We had to protect the family from Finn's negativity," Ashley told Grandpa, spinning cruelty as family protection. But Grandpa's questions weren't just about Christmas, they were about money. He started asking Ashley and Brad about their business, their income, their ability to afford luxury vacations and expensive purchases on what should have been a modest consulting income. "How's business going?" Brad became a regular question at family dinners. "Must be doing very well to afford these nice trips and cars. What's your secret to such consistent success?" The questions made Ashley visibly nervous, especially when Grandpa started asking for details about specific business deals and revenue streams that should have been generating their apparent wealth. Grandpa's questions about money made Ashley very nervous, and her nervousness should have been our second warning. What none of us knew was that Grandpa William had started conducting his own financial investigation into our family's lifestyle, using the same meticulous attention to detail that had built his own wealth over decades. He'd been quietly reviewing bank statements, tax returns, and business filings that painted a very different picture of Ashley and Brad's success story. The numbers told a devastating tale of a family living entirely beyond their means, funding luxury purchases with credit cards, second mortgages, and loans that had no realistic path to repayment. Ashley's designer clothes were financed through retail credit accounts with interest rates that would make loan sharks blush. Brad's BMW was leased with payments that consumed nearly half of their actual monthly income. Their ski trip alone had cost more than most families' annual vacation budget, charged to credit cards that were already maxed out from previous luxury purchases. Grandpa's investigation revealed a family living entirely beyond their means, drowning in debt while playing successful on social media. The deeper Grandpa dug into Brad's consulting business, the more apparent it became that their primary source of income wasn't business success, but business failure. Court documents showed Brad's company had filed for bankruptcy protection twice in 3 years, leaving suppliers and contractors unpaid, while Brad and Ashley continued their luxury lifestyle. Current lawsuits from unpaid vendors totaled over $60,000. The IRS had liens against their property for unpaid business taxes. Their mortgage was 3 months behind, and foreclosure proceedings had been quietly initiated by their lender. But somehow, despite this financial chaos, they'd managed to maintain their image of success through increasingly desperate borrowing against future income that their failing business couldn't possibly generate. Brad's business was failing while Ashley spent like they were millionaires, and the math was about to stop working entirely. The most shocking discovery was that my parents had mortgaged their retirement to enable Ashley's lifestyle. Their modest nest egg, built through 40 years of careful saving and conservative investing, had been systematically drained through emergency loans to Ashley that were never repaid. Mom and Dad had taken out a reverse mortgage on their paid-off house, depleted their 401k accounts through early withdrawals with massive penalties, and maxed out their own credit cards to cover Ashley's expenses when her other funding sources dried up. They'd sacrificed their financial security to maintain the golden child's image, believing Ashley's promises that her business success would eventually allow her to pay them back with interest. Mom and Dad had mortgaged their retirement to fund Ashley's lifestyle, believing golden child promises that would never be kept. When Grandpa realized the full scope of what had been happening, his anger was quiet but absolute. This man who'd built wealth through discipline and delayed gratification was watching his family destroy themselves financially to maintain an illusion of success that fooled no one except themselves. 40 years they saved, he told me during a private phone call, his voice heavy with disappointment. 40 years of living below their means, and they've thrown it all away for Ashley's shopping addiction and Brad's failed business ventures. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was moral. They'd prioritized image over substance, debt over savings, and appearances over the values that had actually built the family's real wealth. Grandpa was angrier than I'd ever seen him, and his anger was about to reshape our entire family's future. When Grandpa William finally compiled the complete financial picture of our family's situation, the numbers were even more devastating than anyone could have imagined. Ashley and Brad weren't just living beyond their means. They were drowning in over $400,000 of debt while maintaining a lifestyle that required twice their actual income to sustain. Their credit card balances alone totaled over $200,000 spread across 17 different accounts, with minimum payments that consumed more than Brad's entire monthly business income. The luxury cars were financed with balloon payments they'd never be able to make. Their mortgage was an adjustable rate loan that had already reset twice, pushing their housing costs beyond what most families earned in total. But the most damaging revelation was that they'd been using credit advances to make minimum payments on other credit accounts, creating a debt spiral that had no mathematical solution. They were literally borrowing money to service the interest on money they'd already borrowed. $400,000 in debt while calling me not real family. The irony was absolutely staggering. The biggest shock came when Grandpa revealed that he'd been secretly subsidizing their lifestyle for over 5 years. Monthly transfers of $3,000 emergency payments for unexpected expenses and direct payments to creditors when Ashley's accounts were about to be closed for non-payment. Every luxury vacation, every designer purchase, every expensive restaurant meal had been funded not by Brad's business success, but by Grandpa's quiet financial intervention. He'd been covering their mortgage payments when they fell behind, paying their car insurance when their accounts were overdrawn, and transferring money for emergencies that seemed to happen every few weeks. The ski trip that had been too expensive for a real family like me had been entirely funded by Grandpa's wire transfer to Ashley's account just 3 days before they left for Vail. Grandpa had been secretly funding their luxury lifestyle for 5 years, including the ski trip where Ashley called me not real family. What made this revelation even more infuriating was discovering how Ashley talked about Grandpa's money when she thought no one was listening. She'd been treating his wealth as her future inheritance, making spending decisions based on money she hadn't earned and didn't technically have access to yet. "Grandpa's loaded," she'd told Brad during a conversation that Grandpa had overheard during a family dinner. "When he's gone, we'll be set for life. We just have to keep up appearances until then, and everything will work out." She'd been spending her inheritance before Grandpa was even dead, treating his life's work as her personal trust fund while calling her brother not good enough to spend Christmas with family. Ashley had been spending her inheritance before Grandpa was even gone, planning his death while rejecting his values. The character assessment that Grandpa quietly conducted was methodical and devastating. He'd been watching how Ashley treated service workers, how she talked about people with less money, how she responded when asked to contribute to family expenses versus when she needed financial help herself. He'd documented her cruelty to me, her dismissive attitude toward anyone who couldn't afford her lifestyle, and her complete lack of gratitude for the financial support that had made her luxury lifestyle possible. "Actions have consequences," he told me during one of our private phone calls. "And cruelty to family has the biggest consequences of all." "Actions have consequences," Grandpa said quietly, "especially cruel ones that reveal someone's true character." The legal preparations that followed were swift and decisive. Grandpa's estate attorney began drafting documents that would fundamentally reshape our family's financial future. Will revisions, trust modifications, and power of attorney changes that reflected his assessment of who had demonstrated real family values versus who had simply expected family money. I wasn't privy to the specific details, but I could see the determination in Grandpa's eyes when he talked about ensuring his life's work would go to people who shared his values, rather than people who'd taken advantage of his generosity while treating family members with cruelty. Grandpa's lawyer visits became more frequent, and his questions about my future plans became more specific and encouraging. Grandpa Williams' approach to delivering consequences was as methodical as everything else he'd done in his 83 years of life. He spent weeks planning every detail of their financial reckoning, consulting with his attorney about legal implications, his accountant about tax consequences, and his financial advisor about the most effective way to cut off funding while protecting his own interests. The plan was comprehensive: immediate termination of all monthly transfers, cancellation of emergency credit lines he'd established in their names, and formal notice that no future financial assistance would be provided for any reason. He also prepared detailed documentation showing exactly how much he'd contributed to their lifestyle over the past 5 years. The timeline was non-negotiable. Everything would end simultaneously without warning, giving them no opportunity to manipulate the situation or guilt him into reconsidering his decision. Grandpa planned every detail of their financial reckoning with the same precision he'd used to build his wealth over decades. While Grandpa was methodically preparing their downfall, Ashley and Brad continued their oblivious spending spree like money would never be a problem again. They'd booked another luxury vacation for spring break, purchased new furniture for their living room, and Ashley had started talking about renovating their kitchen with granite countertops and custom cabinets. Brad bought himself a new set of golf clubs that cost more than most people's monthly car payment, while Ashley scheduled spa treatments and shopping trips that would have funded a modest family's entire entertainment budget for months. They were living like lottery winners while drowning in debt, completely unaware that their financial life support system was about to be permanently disconnected. They kept spending like the money would never run out, oblivious that their financial lifeline was about to be severed forever. The family meeting that would change everything was scheduled as a mandatory family dinner at Grandpa's house with specific instructions that everyone needed to attend and that he had important family business to discuss. The tone of his invitation was formal enough to make everyone nervous, but not specific enough to give them time to prepare arguments or excuses. Grandpa's attorney would be present to witness the proceedings and ensure everything was legally documented. The setting was deliberately chosen. His modest dining room where we'd shared dozens of family meals, where Ashley had often complained about his outdated decor while enjoying the financial benefits of his wealth. The contrast would be perfect, his simple, paid-for house hosting the conversation that would end their debt-funded luxury lifestyle forever. The family meeting was mandatory, and Grandpa's lawyer would be there to make sure everything was legally bulletproof. For me, the anticipation was a mixture of vindication and nervousness. Part of me was eager to see Ashley face consequences for her cruelty, to watch the golden child discover that actions really do have consequences. But another part of me worried about the collateral damage to Mom and Dad, who'd enabled Ashley but didn't necessarily deserve to lose their financial security. Grandpa had assured me that justice didn't mean cruelty, but I wasn't entirely sure what that meant in practical terms when someone's entire lifestyle was built on unsustainable financial foundations. I knew justice was coming, but I wasn't prepared for how complete and devastating it would be for everyone involved. The family gathering at Grandpa Williams' modest dining room felt more like a tribunal than a dinner party. Ashley and Brad arrived in their luxury BMW dressed like they were attending a country club event rather than a family meal. Mom and Dad looked nervous but tried to maintain normalcy, while Grandpa's attorney sat quietly in the corner with a briefcase full of documents that would change everything. The table was set with Grandpa's simple dishes, the same ones we'd eaten from for decades, while Ashley made her usual comments about how he should upgrade his lifestyle now that he could afford better things. The irony was lost on her completely. The family dinner felt more like a trial, and everyone was about to discover who was really guilty. I've called this meeting to discuss the financial support I've been providing to this family. Grandpa began, his voice calm but carrying the authority of someone who'd made final decisions. After careful consideration and recent events, I'm ending all financial assistance to Ashley and Brad effective immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. Ashley's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Brad's face went pale, and Mom and Dad exchanged panicked glances as they realized what this meant for their own financial situation. All monthly transfers, emergency payments, and credit arrangements are canceled as of tonight. You'll need to make your own financial arrangements going forward. Effective immediately, all financial support ends, Grandpa announced, and I watched their comfortable world crumble in real time. Ashley's response was immediate and desperate, launching into the same manipulation tactics that had worked for years but now felt pathetic against Grandpa's quiet resolve. She tried tears, family loyalty appeals, and promises about paying him back once Brad's business turned around. "We're your real family, Grandpa," she pleaded unconsciously, using the same phrase she'd used to exclude me from Christmas. "Family helps family through tough times. We're just going through a temporary rough patch and we'll pay you back every penny with interest." Brad nodded along, frantically promising business deals that were about to close and revenue streams that were just around the corner. The same empty promises he'd been making for years while their debt continued mounting. The desperation was obvious as they realized their financial lifeline was being cut permanently, not temporarily. "We're your real family," Ashley begged, using the same words she'd used to exclude me from Christmas. That's when Grandpa's attorney opened his briefcase and began reading from revised legal documents that laid out exactly how family would be defined going forward. The will reading was methodical and devastating, spelling out inheritance changes that reflected character rather than genetics. "To my grandson Finn, who has demonstrated integrity, responsibility, and kindness even when facing cruelty from family members, I leave the majority of my estate, including all investment accounts, real estate holdings, and business interests." Ashley's face went through several shades of pale as she realized that her assumed inheritance, the money she'd been spending in her mind for years, was going to the brother she'd called not real family. To Ashley, I leave $1 acknowledging her as family while recognizing that she has already received far more financial support than this inheritance could provide. To Finn, who understands that real family means character, not luxury. The lawyer read, and Ashley's assumed inheritance disappeared forever. The moment when mom and dad realized the full scope of their financial crisis was heartbreaking to witness. Without grandpa's support, they couldn't make their mortgage payments cover their credit card minimums or maintain the lifestyle they'd grown accustomed to while enabling Ashley's spending. They'd sacrificed their retirement security for Ashley's image, depleted their savings for Brad's failed business ventures, and mortgaged their future for a golden child who'd never appreciate their sacrifices. Now they were left with debt, no savings, and no safety net except the Social Security they wouldn't be eligible for another decade. "We gave up everything for Ashley's dreams," Mom whispered, finally understanding the price of golden child favoritism. Mom and Dad realized they'd sacrificed their security for Ashley's dreams, and those dreams had become their nightmare. Grandpa stood up slowly, his 83-year-old frame carrying the moral authority of someone who'd lived by his principles for decades. His final statement was delivered with the quiet power of absolute certainty about right and wrong. "Actions have consequences," he said, looking directly at Ashley. "And cruelty to family has the biggest consequences of all. You wanted to know who the real family is? Real family doesn't exclude people for being responsible with money. Real family doesn't humiliate each other in public. Real family earns respect through character, not credit cards. Actions have consequences, and cruelty to family has the biggest consequences of all." Grandpa declared, and justice was finally served. The aftermath of that dinner was swift and devastating for everyone except me. Within 3 months, Ashley and Brad lost their house to foreclosure, had both luxury cars repossessed, and were forced to move into a cramped rental apartment that cost more per month than they could realistically afford on Brad's actual business income. Ashley's designer wardrobe went to consignment shops, her jewelry was sold to cover credit card minimums, and her social media went dark as she couldn't maintain the luxury lifestyle that had defined her online presence. Brad's consulting business finally collapsed completely when he could no longer use credit advances to cover operating expenses. The golden child who'd called me not real family discovered what life looked like without family financial support. Within 6 months, the golden child lost everything she'd taken for granted, and no amount of tears could bring it back. Meanwhile, my relationship with Grandpa deepened in ways I'd never expected. He began teaching me about investments, business principles, and the values that had guided his financial success. The inheritance wasn't just money, it was mentorship, wisdom, and the satisfaction of knowing that someone had recognized my character when my own parents couldn't. "Real family isn't about genetics," he told me during one of our weekly dinners. "It's about the people who share your values, support your growth, and treat you with respect, even when they disagree with your choices." Grandpa taught me that real family is built on character, not genetics, and that lesson was worth more than any inheritance. Looking back now, I realize that Ashley did me a favor when she excluded me from their luxury Christmas trip. Her cruelty revealed everyone's true character, hers, our parents, and most importantly, Grandpa's. Actions really do have consequences, and sometimes those consequences reshape entire families in ways that restore justice and reward character over entitlement. Real family doesn't exclude you for being authentic. It celebrates you for having integrity, and that's a lesson Ashley learned too late to change her outcome. Real family doesn't exclude you for being responsible. It rewards you for having character when everyone else loses theirs.